In the early 2000s, a name emerged on internet forums and quickly became a global phenomenon: John Titor. He claimed to be a time traveler from the future. According to him, he was a soldier sent back in time to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer, which was essential for solving problems in his native time. But who was this man? And why did his words cause such a stir? The truth is that no one knows for sure. To this day, John Titor remains shrouded in mystery. He began posting messages online in 2000, detailing future technologies, global events, and even the collapse of society. One of the most intriguing things about John is that he didn't try to convince anyone that he was real. On the contrary, he said he was just sharing information out of curiosity. Many believed him, while others considered him just another internet troll. After all, at that time, forums were fertile ground for conspiracy theories and far-fetched stories. But there was something different about John Titor. His descriptions of time machines, civil wars, and technological advances seemed too well thought out to be pure invention. He spoke of a world devastated by nuclear conflicts, where small communities struggled to survive. This dark scenario caught the attention of many curious people. Additionally, Titor claimed that he had left his time machine parked at a hotel in Tampa, Florida. This generated even more speculation about his credibility. His sudden disappearance only increased the fascination surrounding his story. Did he really return to the future? Or was it all just a big lie? Regardless of the answer, the case of John Titor remains one of the greatest mysteries of the internet. He proved that the idea of time travel can capture the imagination of millions of people. Today, researchers and enthusiasts still debate his predictions. Some of them seem to have come true, while others remain speculative. One of the reasons John Titor became so famous was his detailed predictions about future events. He spoke as if he knew exactly what was to come. One of the most famous predictions was about a civil war in the United States, which would begin in 2004 and culminate in a devastating global conflict. Although this civil war did not happen as he described, many argue that the protests and political divisions in the U.S. in recent decades reflect part of the scenario that Titor painted. Another impactful prediction was about the spread of global diseases. He stated that a pandemic would occur in the early 2020s, something that eventually became a reality with the arrival of COVID-19. Of course, this raised intriguing questions. Was it just a coincidence? Or did Titor really have some kind of access to the future? In addition, he predicted impressive technological advances, such as the development of quantum computers and flying cars. These ideas seemed surreal at the time, but today we already see companies working in these fields. One of the most debated predictions was about the Olympic Games in 2040. According to Titor, they would be cancelled due to a global economic collapse. So far, we still don't know if this will happen. He also mentioned that the world would face a scarcity of natural resources, leading to conflicts between nations. This sounds familiar to those who follow current discussions about climate change and sustainability. Despite some predictions seeming accurate, others were completely wrong. For example, he stated that in 2015 humanity would have permanent bases on the moon. As we know, this did not happen. These discrepancies make many question Titor's credibility. After all, if he came from the future, why did some of his predictions fail? However, Titor's supporters argue that he may have come from an alternate timeline. In other words, the future he described might not be the same one we are living in now. This theory opens the door to fascinating discussions about quantum physics and the existence of multiple universes. Could every choice we make create a new timeline? Another interesting point is that Titor never asked to be taken seriously. He always claimed that his predictions were just personal observations from his own time. Even so, his words had a lasting impact. They inspired books, documentaries, and even movies about time travel. One of the most fascinating parts of John Titor's story is his detailed description of the time machine he supposedly used to travel to the past. According to him, the machine was a device called C204, developed by a fictional company called Time Travel Corporation. The device operated using advanced principles of quantum physics. Titor explained that the machine worked by creating controllable micro black holes, allowing the traveler to move through different points in time. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, right? But here's the curious detail. He didn't stop there. Titor provided impressive technical specifications, including the use of gravitational fields and nuclear energy to stabilize time travel. He also stated that the machine was limited. For example, it could only travel to periods within 60 years before or after the moment it was built. This would explain why he chose the 2000s as his destination. Another interesting point is that Titor mentioned the machine needed constant calibration. Any error could result in deviations in the timeline or even catastrophes. Many physicists analyzed his descriptions and were divided. Some found the concepts plausible, while others considered them pure speculation without scientific basis. One of the theories Titor cited was the idea of parallel universes. He claimed that every time someone travels through time, they create a new timeline, thus avoiding paradoxes like the famous grandfather paradox. This explanation made many science fiction fans fall even more in love with the story. It combined elements of real scientific theories with a touch of imagination. However, critics pointed out that many of the details provided by Titor were inconsistent or impossible to verify. For example, he never fully explained how the machine was powered. Moreover, some of the technologies he described, like micro-black holes, are far beyond what current science can achieve. Was he just speculating? Or did he really have access to future knowledge? Another mystery is that Titor claimed he left the machine parked at a hotel in Tampa, Florida, during his stay in the 2000s. To this day, no trace of it has been found. This detail led many to believe that the whole story was just an elaborate prank. After all, how could someone hide a time machine in a hotel without drawing attention? Even so, the idea of a time machine continues to capture people's imaginations. It represents the human desire to explore the unknown and challenge the limits of time and space. John Titor's story did not remain confined to internet forums in the 2000s. It became part of popular culture, influencing movies, books, and documentaries about time travel. Many content creators found inspiration in Titor's predictions and descriptions. He proved that a good narrative can capture people's imaginations, regardless of its veracity. For example, documentaries like The John Titor Prophecies deeply analyzed his predictions and tried to connect the dots between what he said and real events that occurred. In the scientific community, however, Titor's story was met with more skepticism. Although some of his ideas aligned with real theories about black holes and parallel universes, they lacked concrete evidence. Experts in quantum physics pointed out that while time travel is theoretically possible in certain mathematical models, the technology required for it is far beyond what we can achieve today. Even so, Titor's case brought important discussions to the forefront about the role of science in society. He showed how eager people are for explanations about the future and the unknown. Another interesting aspect is that Titor also influenced internet culture. He was one of the first figures to gain fame exclusively through online forums, something that anticipated the era of social media. His story also raised ethical questions. If someone could actually travel through time, would it be morally correct to interfere in the past or divulge information about the future? These ethical dilemmas were explored in various works of fiction inspired by Titor. They reflect humanity's fascination with the possibility of altering the course of history. However, not everyone sees Titor as a positive figure. Critics argue that he may have encouraged the proliferation of conspiracy theories and misinformation on the internet. After all, many of Titor's predictions did not come true, and this could lead some people to distrust reliable sources of information. Despite this, the Titor phenomenon also demonstrated the power of online collaboration. During his brief appearance, thousands of people came together to debate his words and try to unravel his mysteries. Today, Titor's legacy is a mix of scientific curiosity, entertainment, and speculation. He continues to be a symbol of humanity's desire to understand the future and transcend the limits of time. One of the most frequently asked questions about John Titor is, which of his predictions actually came true? To answer this, we need to carefully examine what he said and how it aligns with current events. Starting with the hits, one of the most notable predictions was about a global pandemic in the early 2020s. The arrival of COVID-19 in 2019/2020 seemed to confirm part of this prediction, although the details provided by Titor were vague. Another prediction that caught attention was about technological advances. He mentioned quantum computers and advanced artificial intelligence, areas that are evolving rapidly and beginning to gain ground in the real world. However, not all of Titor's predictions were so accurate. For example, he stated that in 2015 there would be permanent bases on the moon. So far, this has not happened, despite future plans by space agencies like NASA. He also predicted a civil war in the United States starting in 2004, something that clearly did not occur. Although there are growing political tensions, they have not materialized in the way described by Titor. Another failed prediction was about a global economic collapse in 2015, which was supposed to lead to the cancellation of the 2040 Olympic Games. So far, there is no sign of such a collapse. This raises an interesting question. Was Titor just guessing dates? Or was there some logic behind his predictions? Some argue that he may have based his ideas on trends observed in his time. On the other hand, some of his predictions seem to be partially correct. For example, he talked about severe climate changes and a scarcity of natural resources, problems that are becoming increasingly evident today. He also mentioned the increased use of nuclear energy and alternative energy sources. While this process is underway, we are still far from the scenario he described. Interestingly, Titor predicted that the internet would become an even more powerful tool but also more fragmented. Today, we see debates about online polarization and the impact of social media, something that reflects part of his vision. Another intriguing prediction was about the popularity of flying cars and autonomous vehicles. While flying cars are still rare, companies like Tesla and others are heavily investing in autonomous vehicles. However, many of his predictions about global conflicts and drastic societal changes have not come true. This makes some people question whether he really had access to the future or was just speculating. A plausible explanation is that he used a combination of general knowledge and imagination to create a convincing future scenario. After all, many of his predictions sound like extrapolations of existing trends. Even so, the fact that some predictions are partially correct continues to fuel the mystery. Could Titor have been right in parts but came from a timeline different from ours? Since John Titor appeared on internet forums, an avalanche of conspiracy theories began to emerge. Some of them try to prove that he was real, while others claim that it was all just a big act. One of the most popular theories is the idea that Titor was, in fact, an agent of the US government. According to this hypothesis, he was testing how the public would react to information about time travel and dystopian futures. This theory gains strength from the fact that Titor disappeared as mysteriously as he appeared. Some believe he was pulled off the scene as soon as his mission was completed. Another theory suggests that Titor was part of a secret military experiment involving artificial intelligence. In this scenario, he would be an advanced chatbot created to deceive people and study their reactions. Although it seems unlikely to some, this idea is not entirely dismissed. After all, the 2000s were a time when AI technology was beginning to develop rapidly. There are also those who believe that Titor was an ordinary person with an extraordinary talent for creating convincing narratives. He might have invented the entire story just for fun or to gain online notoriety. This theory is supported by the fact that many of his predictions failed or were vague enough to be interpreted in various ways. This is a common characteristic of conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. On the other hand, some defenders of Titor argue that he really traveled through time but from an alternate timeline. In this case, his failed predictions would be because our present diverged from the future he knew. This idea is based on concepts from quantum physics, such as the theory of multiple universes. If Titor came from a different timeline, this would explain why some of his predictions came true and others did not. Another interesting conspiracy theory is that Titor was silenced or eliminated after revealing too much information. Some believe he might even be alive today, hiding somewhere. This version further fuels the myth of Titor, transforming him into an almost legendary figure. For his most fervent followers, he is seen as a modern prophet or a martyr of science. However, skeptics point out that many of these conspiracy theories lack concrete evidence. They are mainly based on speculation and the desire to believe in something extraordinary. Moreover, Titor's emergence coincided with a time when the internet was becoming more accessible, allowing stories like his to spread quickly. This helped amplify his impact. Regardless of what the truth is, the conspiracy theories surrounding Titor demonstrate the power of narratives in human culture. They reflect our insatiable curiosity about the unknown and the inexplicable. Titor's story is not just an internet curiosity. It also left deep marks on scientific and technological debates. His narrative raised important questions about what is possible and what is fiction in the field of science. One of Titor's main contributions was popularizing the concept of time travel for the general public. Before him, ideas like black holes, parallel universes, and temporal paradoxes were mainly discussed in academic circles. Today, thanks in part to the Titor phenomenon, these concepts are more accessible and are frequently debated in podcasts, YouTube videos, and even classrooms. He helped democratize access to these complex ideas. Moreover, the technical descriptions provided by Titor about his supposed time machine inspired many quantum physics enthusiasts to study the subject further. Although his explanations were speculative, they opened doors to deeper discussions. Interestingly, some of the ideas presented by Titor align with real theories of modern physics. For example, scientists like Stephen Hawking and Kip Thorne have explored the possibility of time travel using wormholes. However, while Titor described functional time machines, current scientists still face enormous challenges in turning these ideas into reality. The energy required to create a stable wormhole, for example, is something far beyond the reach of current technology. Titor also had an impact on the field of artificial intelligence and automation. His predictions about autonomous cars and advanced computers reflect trends being developed today, although we are still far from the scenario he described. Companies like Tesla, Google, and IBM are heavily investing in AI and quantum computing, areas that Titor impressively mentioned for his time. This makes some people see his predictions as glimpses of the future. In the field of ethics, Titor's story also brought important questions to the forefront about the use of technology. If someone could really travel through time or alter future events, what would the moral implications be? These ethical dilemmas are widely discussed today, especially regarding AI and genetic editing. Titor may not have directly predicted these technologies, but his story serves as a reminder that scientific progress requires responsibility. Moreover, Titor influenced debates about climate change and resource scarcity. His bleak predictions about water wars and global economic collapse echo warnings made by scientists and environmental activists today. Although his predictions are dramatic, they help draw attention to real problems we face, such as global warming and social inequality. In this sense, Titor can be seen as a warning for the future. On the other hand, critics argue that stories like Titor's can divert focus from practical solutions. Instead of debating dystopian scenarios, we need to act now to avoid future crises. Despite this, there is no denying that Titor left a lasting legacy. He proved that well-constructed stories can capture people's imaginations and encourage them to think about the future in new and creative ways. More than 2 decades after his appearance on internet forums, John Titor still sparks divided opinions. For some, he is a visionary whose predictions offer insights into the future. For others, he is nothing more than a cleverly crafted fraud. Among Titor supporters, there are those who firmly believe he was a real time traveler. They argue that some of his predictions came true, such as the global pandemic and technological advances like autonomous cars, as evidence of his authenticity. These supporters also highlight the complexity of the technical descriptions provided by Titor. For them, it would be unlikely for someone without deep knowledge of physics and technology to invent such specific details. Moreover, many admirers of Titor see his story as a metaphor for the challenges humanity will face in the future. They believe his predictions serve as important warnings about issues like climate change and resource wars. However, Titor's critics are equally vocal. They point out that many of his predictions completely failed, such as lunar bases in 2015 and a civil war in the US in 2004. For them, this proves that Titor did not have access to the future. Another point raised by critics is that Titor never provided concrete proof of his claims. No photos of the time machine, no physical or scientific evidence was presented to corroborate his story. Moreover, many argue that Titor was a deliberately vague creation, designed to attract attention and generate speculation. His predictions were generic enough to fit different scenarios, depending on interpretation. For some skeptics, Titor is a classic example of how the internet can amplify fictitious narratives. They see his story as a precursor to modern conspiracy theories that dominate digital platforms. Despite the criticisms, there is a third, more neutral view of Titor. Many see his story as intelligent entertainment, a kind of social experiment that tested how far people would be willing to believe. Titor seemed to understand universal themes like curiosity, fear of the future, and the desire for control. Regardless of what the truth is, Titor remains a fascinating figure. He represents the power of narratives to capture people's imaginations and influence cultural and scientific debates. Today, his name is often mentioned in documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube videos. He has become an icon of digital culture, symbolizing the blend of science fiction and reality. Interestingly, even those who reject his story as false admit that it was successful in drawing attention to important issues. Titor managed to make people think about the future in ways few figures have. Moreover, his story continues to inspire new generations of content creators. Movies, series, and books about time travel often cite Titor as a significant cultural reference. Although the truth of John Titor's story is debatable, it offers valuable lessons. It can be used as an educational tool to address topics like science, technology, ethics, and even human psychology. One of the first lessons we can take from Titor is the importance of critical thinking. By analyzing his predictions and theories, we are encouraged to question what is real and what is speculation, developing essential skills for navigating a world full of information. For example, by examining Titor's predictions, we can teach students to differentiate between concrete evidence and vague assumptions. This is especially relevant in an era dominated by fake news and misinformation. Moreover, Titor's story can be used to introduce complex scientific concepts, such as quantum physics, black holes, and parallel universes. Even if his descriptions are speculative, they can serve as a starting point for deeper discussions. Teachers can use Titor as a practical example of how human imagination can inspire scientific advances. Many modern inventions started as seemingly impossible ideas, just like Titor's predictions. Another important lesson is about the ethics of technology. Titor's descriptions of time machines and artificial intelligence raise crucial questions about how we should use scientific progress responsibly. For example, if we could really travel through time or alter future events, what would the consequences be for society? These debates can help students and scientists reflect on the impacts of their discoveries. Titor's story can also be used to discuss climate change and resource scarcity. His bleak predictions about water wars and global economic collapse can serve as warnings about the problems we face today. By turning these predictions into discussion points, we can encourage people to act on urgent issues like sustainability and global cooperation. Moreover, Titor teaches us about the power of narratives. His story shows how a good narrative can capture people's imaginations and influence cultural and scientific debates, even if it is fictional. This lesson is especially relevant for content creators and communicators. It demonstrates that well-constructed stories can be used to educate, inform, and inspire large audiences. Another interesting aspect is how Titor's story reflects humanity's desire to understand the future. Since ancient times, people have tried to predict what is to come, and Titor is just another chapter in this eternal quest. By studying his narrative, we can learn more about how people react to the unknown and how this shapes their actions in the present. This is useful not only for scientists but also for leaders and decision-makers. Finally, Titor's story reminds us that the future is not written. Even if his predictions were true, they would show that our choices in the present can drastically change the course of events. Throughout this script, we explored the fascinating story of John Titor, from his predictions about the future to the cultural and scientific impact his narrative generated. Now, it's time to reflect on what we've learned from his story. John Titor may have been a real time traveler or just a fictional creation, but that doesn't diminish the impact he had. His story reminds us that humans always seek to understand the unknown and transcend the limits of what is possible. He also taught us that the future is not something fixed or inevitable. Every choice we make in the present shapes the world we will inhabit tomorrow. This idea should motivate us to act consciously and responsibly. Moreover, the figure of Titor demonstrates the power of narratives to influence debates and capture people's imaginations. Whether as a source of entertainment or an educational tool, stories like his play an important role in our society. In the field of science, Titor brought concepts like time travel, parallel universes, and artificial intelligence to the forefront. Although these ideas are still far from becoming reality, they continue to inspire research and innovation. On the other hand, his story also serves as a warning about the dangers of misinformation. In an era where fake news and conspiracy theories spread rapidly, we need to develop critical skills to separate fact from fiction. Titor's predictions about climate change, resource scarcity, and global conflicts are urgent reminders of the challenges we face today. Even if his words are speculative, they resonate with real problems that require our immediate attention. At the same time, his narrative invites us to dream big. It shows us that, regardless of our current limitations, human imagination can open doors to new possibilities and technological advances. Ultimately, John Titor's legacy is not in the predictions he made or failed to make, but in how his story inspires us to think about the future and our role in it. Now, I invite you to reflect on the impact of stories like Titor's in your own life. How do you see the future? What are the most urgent issues we need to address today to ensure a better tomorrow? If you enjoyed this content and want to continue exploring topics like science, technology, and the future, subscribe to the channel to follow more videos like this. Together, we can dive into fascinating discussions and learn from each other. Also, share this video with your friends and family. Who knows, they might also find inspiration in the ideas we discussed here. Leave your opinion in the comments. Do you believe John Titor was real? Or do you see his story as a metaphor for the challenges of the future? Your perspectives are important to enrich this conversation. Remember, the future is shaped by the choices we make today. Why not start now thinking about how you can contribute to a better world? Small actions can make a big difference. Thank you very much for following this script to the end. I hope it sparked your curiosity and offered new perspectives on the mystery of John Titor. Until next time.